Hello everyone and welcome back to another Iris tutorial video. My name is Alex, and in this session we're going to cover some of the standards that we have in Iris. As in all my videos, I do a quick recap of what we talked about in the previous video. In the last video we talked about how to set Iris up on your computer, and I know that I mentioned that I was going to try to make these videos about 10 minutes long or something close to that, and I know that one went way long. The reason for that is because so much of the information is, it relies on the other information earlier on in the video, so I know that one went a little bit long, so we'll try to make this one a little bit shorter. Luckily there's not a lot of stuff to cover in this one, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a break, and this video shouldn't be too much more than maybe like 5 or 6 minutes. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to do is bring up AutoCAD. And I'm going to create a new drawing, and we're not going to be building right away, but I want to show you some of the standards that we've been changing, and this will help us out with transferring any designs that we work with to go from designer to designer. This will be especially helpful when we start getting into clone projects. So if we have a project that someone had created in the past and a client wants to use it for another project, it can be assigned to someone else without having to do any kind of housekeeping like changing layers or dimension styles or textiles or anything like that. So the first topic that we're going to cover in this is the layers, and I'll just type in layers to bring up what we have here. And if you're a new designer, this is going to be pretty much all new for you, but if you're a designer that's been with us for a while, this might need a little bit of explanation. Before we started working with Iris and we were using our older system Exhibitware, every single designer had their own modified version of a drawing template, and that allowed them to create their own layers, create their own dimension styles, and create their own text styles. And while that worked out for a lot of things, that was pretty much beneficial for everyone, it got to a point where we had duplicate layers for panels or duplicate layers in naming nomenclature for metal. So if we brought something in that another designer had done, we would end up having maybe 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 layers for effectively the same classification of parts. So what we've done with this is we've pretty much adopted a modified version of the Aia Layer Standards, and AIA stands for American Institute of Architects. The naming definitions for these are basically 4 letters, a dash, 4 letters, a dash, and you just basically take something that's very general that you work with and make it more specific as you go along. So in the layers, I'll show you up here at the top here where it's flashing a little bit. We have layers set up here that have LAYO at the beginning. We have layers for MODL at the beginning, and we have layers for TBLK at the beginning. And these basically break down to layers that we have for our layouts, which is what we would use in our paper space down at the tabs at the bottom. All of the MODL layers will be will be layers that we use in model space, so you'll be using these primarily when you're creating your drawings. And the layers down here at the bottom that have TBLK are reserved just for the title block, and we really won't be changing much of these. If we do, it's something that I'll be changing here on my end and then sending out to you guys. So I'm going to cover a little bit more of the specifics of these, and we'll start off with the layout layers. For the layout layers, we have the one here that covers for dimensions, one specifically for scheduling, or if you're used to Exhibitware, we usually call them extracts or reports. We have one dedicated for text, so this will be anything that you're putting in for annotations. And then the last one will be for the viewports themselves in Paperspace. Now for the next set of layers, the MODLs, and I'll highlight those so you can see what I'm talking about here. If you're a designer that's been with us for a while and has used Exhibitware, you're going to start to see a lot of parallels with what we've had before. And I'll run through these here real quick so you can see them. We have ACCS, which is all of our accessories. We have metal, which is then broken down even further into cross pieces. Metal broken down into SEG metal. Another metal that's specific for truss. And lastly, we have a metal that is specific for uprights. Underneath that, we have a couple of layers that are miscellaneous. We have one for our carpet, our floor plan, our furniture, and our grid. The grid is tied to the carpet layer, and all that is just to give us an idea of what we're looking for in terms of planning dimensionally. The grid is set up in 1 foot increments, and even though we do all of our design in metric in order to accommodate Octanorm and our current panel naming system, when we plan things out, we usually do it in feet. The ones underneath miscellaneous are others. And and I know that sounds a little vague, but what that stands for is other items. And when we get into the schedule generation, you'll start to see what that means. For this one, the other items are primarily for shelves, countertops, and ceilings. And there are a lot of times where we actually turn off the countertop itself so we can see a ceiling or so we can see a countertop. So for if you have a ceiling or a shelf, we're going to throw it underneath modl-other, and if we have a countertop, it'll just be model other countertop. Underneath that, we start getting into the panels, and this will be the last part for anything that has an modl in front of it. Now, for all these panels, we've tried to break them down into something that we use in probably 90% of our drawings. And when I start to talk about panels, you might hear me talk about something called rigid panels. This will be something that covers anything that can pretty much stand up on its own inside a channel. So this could be something made out of Travasil, out of foam core, ultraboard. Anything that has any kind of rigidity will either go into model panel if it has no art, or it'll go into model panel graphic if it's an art panel. The next set of panels that I want to talk about are fabric, and since these go into a channel themselves, they go into an SEG channel usually. I have these broken out into non-art fabric panels, which is just model panel fabric, and then art panel versions of it, model panel fabric graphic. Now there is a reason why I have the fabric panels broken out separately from the regular panels and the regular rigid panel graphics. And the reason for that is that the fabric panels usually close up an entire structure. So there will be times where we have rigid panels behind fabric. It could be ultraboard, it could be a melamine panel, and those panels will hold things like maybe shelves or shelf brackets or even monitor brackets. So that's why we keep these ones separate. The last panels that I have are for plexiglass. And we have one for plexiglass regular, and the other one is for plexiglass non-art, and the other one is for plexiglass with graphics. The last layers down here at the bottom are for the title block itself, and since we won't really be using this for much of anything, I'll just kind of gloss over these here real fast. This layer right here will be responsible for anything that has the attributes for the title block. This one's for the border. These are ones for the text fields, anything for images. This one will be holding any type of text, anything that's not a text variable or a text field. And lastly, we'll have the title block itself. And as I mentioned before, all the layers that are in this right now are pretty much responsible for covering about 90% of our drawings. There's going to be some times where we throw some custom elements in there, or we may start to throw new types of metal. It could be something from a company called Rex Frame. It could be B Matrix. We could be using AGAM for some reason. And if we start using it enough, please let me know, and we can make a record of it, see how popular it becomes, and then we can apply it to the standards. So whenever someone opens up a drawing, we're all on the same page. That pretty much covers everything for the layer standards, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of this window, and we're going to go to the next one, which is going to be our dimension style standards. I'll bring up the window so we can take a look at it. Over the past couple of years, each designer's had their own little variation on the dimension style, and we've been trying to find a way to see if we can tighten it up and make sure that we can come up with a dimension style that works for everyone. And I've been talking with salespeople, account executives, graphics department, and structural department, or sorry, not structural department, ops department, the department that pulls the metal. And we ended up creating a dimension style that pretty much covers everything for everyone. And that'll be up here, called Iris dimstyle. This dimension style will be the primary style that we use from here on out. And as you can tell in this little diagram that we have down here, it shows everything in metric and in inches fractional, which is really good for the clients to take a look at and give them a sense of measurement for spatial planning. Now, because a lot of our panels and a lot of our metal that we have in our inventory is always based off of a metric standard, we still put the metric in here. Keep getting the tooltip coming in. We still use the metric version up here up at the top, just so we can take the dimension and quickly apply it to the panel or quickly apply it to the metal. If you see any other standards in here for dimension styles, here's one here, which is our default, which we can't really delete. But there are some other ones in there. I think one of them is called SES Admin, and another one may be called SES Standard. If you do see those in there, you don't have to purge them out or try to delete them. Just make sure you don't use them. That pretty much wraps up everything for our dimension styles. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and we'll talk about textiles here in a second. So I'll bring up the window so you can see what I'm talking about with our textiles. Very much like with the dimension styles, each designer had their own take on the dimension styles, using different types of fonts, different types of sizes, things being underlined. And while that looks okay, we wanted to be able to come up with something that is consistent across the board and basically have a bit of a sub-brand for all of our drawings. Now, even though our shop drawings really don't fall within the scope of our branding standards, that's something that's kind of more geared towards our renderings for sales, we still want to have a look that is instantly recognizable regardless of who had designed it. In this textiles, you'll see that we have 5 in here right now, and just like we did with the dimension styles, you'll see the standard that we can't delete. We also have one in here for Arial, which we can use for custom annotation, which we keep in here. But the ones that we're going to be using the most are going to be TBLK Arial, TBLK Arial Bold, and TBL Arial Bold Italics. Now, it's not only important to be able to use these 3 textiles as much as you can in lieu of the other ones, but it's also even more important to not purge them. And the reason for that is because the title block and a lot of the self-labeling modules that are inside Iris rely on these textiles. If we pull these textiles out for any reason, we won't be able to do any of the labeling within Iris. And since we don't need to talk about this anymore, we can go ahead and cancel out of it. And that pretty much covers everything that I want to talk about with standards as far as what we need the drawings to look like inside Iris. And as I mentioned before, this is kind of a good 90 to 95% of what we're going to be using all the time, which is why we have a lot more layers now than we did before. And that's to make sure that everything that we're using is the same across the board for all the designers. If you do find that you're creating a layer over and over again for a part or an assembly that's starting to become more popular, say it's something like Rex Frame or B Matrix, something that doesn't fall within the scope of any of these layers, take a screen cap of what you're calling the layer itself and give me some information on the parts that you're putting within those layers, and I can take that and make that a standard layer that we can basically send out to everyone. Once again, the biggest thing that we're trying to do with all of this is to make sure that all of us are using the same layers. that pretty much wraps up this video, and as I mentioned before, this is going to be a pretty short video. Like I say in all of my videos, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. If you come up with a problem that you're not really able to explain very well, go ahead and bring up TeamViewer. Now, I'll bring it up here in mine so you can kind of get an idea of see what the window is about. If you have an issue and you want me to take a look at it on your machine in real time, send me an email with the problem and send me your user ID and your password, and I'll be able to look at your desktop and take a look at AutoCAD while I'm on there and see if we can't recreate the problem and come up with a solution. If it's a problem that I'm not able to solve, I can always contact our developer and we can figure out a solution for it. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll talk to you in the next video.